Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. I am your host Geekman, and today we're going to learn how to create an aged graffiti text effect in Photoshop. Now, a couple of assumptions I need to get out of the way right off the bat. Number one, I am using Photoshop CC 2018. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, some of the effects may not work as expected. Second, I am using Windows. So if you're using a Mac, when I say hit the Control key on the keyboard, that's the Command key. And when I say hit the Alt key on the keyboard, that's the Option key. So with all of that out of the way, let's get started by hitting Control N on the keyboard to bring up a new image dialog box. Okay, and let's name this Graffiti text. I hope that's how you spell graffiti. And we're going to use a width of 3,840 pixels, height of 2,160 pixels, resolution 150 pixels per inch, RGB color 8-bit, background doesn't matter, we're going to be changing that. Our color profile is sRGB and we're using square pixels. So let's hit create and we are now ready to begin. Now I have a link in the description below to the images and fonts that I'll be using, but feel free to use any background image or font that you want for this effect. Now the background that I'm using is this nice wall photo that I found online. The link is in the description below. And what I want to do is I want to make this fill up my entire canvas. So I'm just going to resize this until it looks the way I want, which I think this looks pretty good. Got this nice thing over here and the white line underneath. So now that I have that, what I need to do is we need to turn this into our background, which it is, and also into a displacement map for use later to displace our text onto this wall to make it look as if the text is part of the wall instead of just laid on top of it. So the way that we're going to do that, first of all, we're going to get rid of this background. Like I said, we don't need it. We have our wall. The way that we're going to turn this into a displacement map is we're going to turn it into a black and white using an adjustment layer. So let's go down to our adjustment layers and let's go to black and white. And you don't need to change that at all, just leave it black and white, done. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is we need to bump up the contrast, because right now it's pretty whitewashed, it's very tonally similar, so we need to get deep blacks and bright whites on this. So what we're going to do is insert a levels adjustment layer. So we're going to go back to our adjustment layers and put in our levels, like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring our blacks here closer to the center. And I think somewhere, let's say 60. Yeah, let's say 60 looks good for this particular image. And let's bring our whites in also to cut that off. And not too much, though. I think about 230. Yeah, let's make it 230. So you can see that that looks a lot different than it did before. Here it is without the levels. Here it is with the levels. And you can see it's a lot more contrasty now that we've done those levels. And that's what we're looking for. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is create a new merged layer above this. And the way that we do that is we hit Control, Alt, Shift, and the letter E on our keyboard. And you can see we now have a new merged layer. Let's double click on that and name it Merged B and W. Okay, so now we have our merged black and white layer. Now what we need to do with this now is we need to save this file as it is, as its own Photoshop file. And you can name this anything that you want. Go to File, go to Save As. Just remember where you save it. I'm going to save it here, and I'm going to name this as Graffiti Text Displacement Map. Okay, so Graffiti Text Displacement Map. I'm going to save that. And then what you need to do before you do anything else is you need to save another copy of this, because we don't want to work on our displacement map. We want to work on the file that we're actually going to put our text on. We need this displacement map to stay as it is, as a black and white, highly contrasty image, in order for the graffiti to look like it's on the wall. So what we're going to do now is we're going to immediately do another save as, and we're going to get rid of displacement map at the end of this. Okay, and we now have it as just graffiti text itself. Okay, so we've got our displacement map for graffiti text and we've got graffiti text. We're going to hit save and we now have, as you see up here, just graffiti text, no displacement map. So now we can get rid of this black and white stuff. We don't need it anymore. Now, I don't like to throw anything away. You can if you would like to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the top layer, the merge black and white. I'm going to hold down Shift and select the black and white layer here. That will then select all three. And then I'm going to hit Control G on the keyboard to group them all together. I will name this black and white, B and W, and then I'll just turn it off. And you can see we're right back to our original background image of a wall for our text to sit on. So now that we're doing that, we can now create a new layer above our wall layer. And we don't need to name this anything. All we're going to do is we're going to put our text in here. Now, it doesn't matter what what font you use. I am going to use the font that I think looks good with this effect right now. But almost any font works with this as long as it's a good, thick, graffiti-looking font. Okay, so let's go to our text tool, which is T on the keyboard, and let's bring up our character palette. Now, if you don't see the character palette, go up here to Window, go to Character, and then your character palette will show up. Okay, now the font that I'm using is Gang Bang Crime. I'm using it at 135 points. I'm using the kerning here at 100. That gives me a lot of space between the letters. And I'm also, for this particular font, now you don't need this maybe if you're using a different font, but for this font, I have found that its vertical scale needs to be about twice the size of its horizontal scale. So normally it's 100 and 100. I just doubled this to 200, and then that looks okay to me. But you can play around with that on your own with whatever font that you're using. Okay, so that's all that we need there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to click here, and we're going to put in our text. Now I'm using Pixel and Magic, and there you go. You can see Pixel Magic right there. Now the kerning here, like I said, is pretty good, but this M and this A is a little close. So if you need to fix your kerning for your font, what you need to do is put your cursor in between the letters that you need to move, then hold down Alt on the keyboard and use your left and right arrow keys to move things further apart or closer together. Okay, and that will take care of that. So I am going to move a few things here just to give myself a little bit of space between the letters, and I think that looks pretty good. Let's bring that a little closer. So once you have it where you want it to be, just hit the little check mark up there, and you now have your text. Now I'm going to go back to my Move tool, which is V on the keyboard, and I'm going to move my text where I want it placed on my wall, which is right about here-ish. Let's move it up a little, right about there. Let's, yeah, that looks good right there. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to give our text the graffiti look. Okay, and that's going to be done mostly with just some layer styles. So let's get right into it. So let's go down here to our layer styles, and the first one that we're going to need is going to be a stroke. So we're going to click on stroke right here. Our size is going to be 10. Okay, we're going to leave it, we're going to put this into the center. Blend mode is going to be normal. Opacity is going to be 100%. Overprint is unchecked. Fill type is color. And the color that we're using is going to be black, which is down here, all zeros, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Hit OK, and we now have a black outline. It doesn't show because I'm using black for my text right now, but that changes very soon. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to give this an inner shadow. So click on inner shadow, and the blend mode that we're using is normal. The color that we're using is going to be pure white. Our opacity is going to be at 75%, and our angle here, remember, uncheck use global light. We never really use that, so our angle is going to be at 45 degrees. Distance here is going to be 20. Choke is going to be 0. Size is 0. Contour is going to be linear. Anti-alias is unchecked. Noise is 0. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to give it a gradient overlay, and this is why the color that we originally used didn't matter. We're going to use gradient overlay right here. Now the gradient overlay is going to be a blend mode of normal. Dither is unchecked. Opacity is 100%. And the gradient that we're using here is this guy right here, which is called magenta yellow. Okay, and if you don't see these, all you have to do is go to the sprocket, click on that, go down to Color Harmonies 2, click on it, hit OK, and then you'll see these. Click on this guy right here, and then you'll have this magenta yellow gradient. You want to make sure reverse is checked, align with layer is checked, style is linear, angle is going to be at 90 degrees, and scale is going to be at 45 degrees. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to give this a drop shadow. So let's go down here, click on drop shadow. The blend mode that we're going to use is normal. The color that we're using is going to be black, all black, that's zeros. Angle here is going to be at 65 degrees. Remember, use global light is unchecked. Distance is going to be at 35. So let's make that 35. Then we're going to make this 0, and we're going to make size 0 down here too. Okay, contour is going to be linear, anti-alias is checked, noise is 0, and layer knocks out drop shadow. Okay, that is now all done. We're going to hit OK. And the next thing that we need to do is going to sound a little weird, but it makes perfect sense. You're going to turn this text layer into a smart object. So we're going to right click on this, and we're going to go down here to convert to smart object, convert it to a smart object, and now we've got a smart object of this text. Okay, that's because we need to add in even a few more layer styles. And you can't really do what we wanted to do with the text itself. It needs to be a smart object in order for this to work. Also, the next couple of parts, you want it to be a smart object too. Okay, so now that it's a smart object, we can add on a few more layer styles. So let's go down here to our layer styles again, and let's go back to stroke, because now we're going to add in a much thicker, weirder stroke to this. Okay, the size is going to be at 10. We're going to now make this on the outside. Blend mode is going to be normal, and it's going to be opacity of 100%. Overprint is unchecked. Fill type is going to be color, and the color that we're using here is going to be a nice blue. So let's go with 3795FF. Okay, this nice bluish color. You can use any color that you want, but this looks pretty cool to me. Then we're going to use a drop shadow. We're going to make this drop shadow really big so that it looks like somebody spray painted all the way around it with a certain color. Okay, and we're going to use a purple. So let's make this normal, and the color, like I said, is going to be this nice purpley color. So we're going to go with, let's see here, 9F0DCF. Okay, and that's this nice purple. Like I said, we're going to hit OK there. Opacity is going to be at 100%. Our angle is again going to be at 65. Use global light is unchecked. Distance here, however, is going to be at 40. Okay, and our spread here is going to be at 90, and our stroke size, is going to be at 65. Okay, linear, anti-alias, noise is going to be at 0, and layer knocks out drop shadow is checked. That's all that we need there. We're going to hit OK, and we now have basically our graffiti. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is apply that displacement map. Remember that displacement map that we made? Now is the time to apply it. So we're going to go up here to filter. We're going to go down here to distort. Then we're going to go to displace. And we're going to make our horizontal scale at 5. Our vertical scale is going to be 5. And displacement map is going to be stretched to fit. And undefined areas will repeat edge pixels. Okay, we're going to hit OK. And then we got to find our displacement map. And here is our graffiti text displacement map. That's what we're looking for, and that's what we're going to use. So let's hit open. And there you go. We've now displaced our text. It looks a little weird, I know, but it's going to get fixed up and look really cool in just one moment. Okay, so let's make sure that we're on our layer here. Make sure you're on your text layer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to play around with our layer style blending options. Okay, we haven't played around with this very much in the past. So we're going to go down here to our layer styles. We're going to go up here to blending options and click on that. All right, and that will bring up our standard layer effects. But right up at the very top, it says blending options. And the blending options that we're going to play around with are right here, opacity, which is the same thing that you see over here, opacity on your layers palette. Okay, but the important thing down here is this blend if. Okay, we're going to do blend if gray, and we're going to use the underlying layer. And the reason that we're using underlying layer and not this layer is because what we want to blend is what's underneath our text. We want to blend that with our text. Okay, so let's change our opacity here to only 85%. And then what you need to do is play around with underlying layer. And you can see if I move this around, it starts to get chunky because you're showing through the layer underneath. Okay, but it's pretty harsh. It's pretty hard to make it out, and it doesn't look very smooth or very good, especially if you add in some of the white. See, that looks okay, but not great. And the way that you make it look great is you hold down Alt on your keyboard, and you can see that the nubs here have little lines in them. And that's because if you're holding down Alt and you then click on one of the sides, it splits. And that makes the blend a lot smoother. Okay, and you can see that the blend is a lot smoother than it was before. And then I do the same thing with the white, and you can see that the blend gets a whole lot smoother and a lot cooler. And now it looks like it's actually on the wall. And you play around with this, you make this look however you want it to look, and it changes for each and every image that you happen to use. And you can overlap like so if you want, but you can see that this looks very cool. And it actually shows the brick through the text, so it looks like the text was on the brick and weathered away, rather than just being plastered on there if you were to use, say, a different blend mode like overlay. okay, which changes the color of things and shows things through. So by leaving it normal, changing its opacity a little bit, and then changing this underlying layer and splitting up the nubs, you then get this really cool look. Okay? And there you have it. Text, an aged graffiti text effect in Photoshop. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. I do new tutorials every Tuesday. And once again, this is Geekman signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.